Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Get Into It with Saafir. I am your host, and tonight we are going to be discussing a topic that is still breaking news as we speak. As many of you can imagine, as we continue to contend with the impact and the traumas that are associated with distance learning, the quarantining required as it results from COVID-19, and the impending vaccinations and testing that residents must face. As you can imagine, parents, families, students, and community members at large are facing a number of pressures and issues like never before. And if that were not bad enough, we are now coming on the heels of a report that further indicates the lack of regard and consideration that families face on a daily basis. But tonight, I have with me two special guests who will be joining me for this conversation. And the first up is a lifelong 20 plus year educator and professor. She is a district leader in the city of Newark. She is an education advocate, and above all else, she is a parent. So join me in welcoming Sheila Montague.
Good evening, everyone. And Saafir, hello. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Thank you for joining me tonight. We definitely have lots to talk about.
Absolutely.
But before we jump into that topic, I want to take this opportunity to introduce my second guest for tonight. She is also an education advocate. She is also an educator, and she is also a parent. So join me in welcoming Marcella Simadiris.
Hi, peace, family. Hope everybody's well tonight.
Good. Yes, good evening, Marcella. Thank you so much for joining us on tonight. This, as you all may have assumed, it was something that we pulled together with short notice because of the extent and the impact of the inflammatory remarks that we will be reviewing on tonight from a professional of sorts. So as we jump in, I'm going to first set the stage by pulling up the remarks that we're going to be discussing on tonight. And I want you all to brace yourselves because, as I said, we are contending with COVID-19. We're contending with isolation and social distancing. But now we have to continue to contend with a lack of care, concern, and consideration for families during this time. So as I pull up an article, and as I said, brace yourselves, you're going to find the following. So in an article that was published in Tap Into Newark, there was a quote that reads as follows. Here in Newark, we're going to assume that because of people's desire to return to normal and the COVID fatigue, they are going to lie, Abigan said. We know they're going to lie. So if you're demanding that all teachers and staff get tested, why not students? Now, reading this article, you'll come to learn that the subject matter that was at hand was a discussion around the appropriateness of requiring students to, one, be tested, and to, two, later on be vaccinated in order to attend school in person. Now, while that topic may be a hot topic and there may be a lot of feelings about that discussion in particular, the thing that stands out to me the most are these statements made by John Abigan. Now, before we jump into the statement, we're first going to answer the question, who is this person? Well, the person cited here is the president of the Newark Teachers Union. Now, when we talk about education and what students should expect to face in the classroom, you would expect that someone in this type of role would demonstrate the type of empathy that teachers have to show on a daily basis. Teachers struggle themselves with the same problems that families are facing as a result of COVID-19, but they also have additional struggles and pressures to perform and to teach without having been given appropriate training early on for doing virtual learning. But here we have the president of that organization saying the assumption is that families will lie just to get their students back in school. And then the way he mentioned it, and I'll pull it up again. He says, here in Newark, we are going to assume they're going to lie. Who is he speaking for? Is he speaking for Newark? And who is we in the statement, we're going to assume families will lie? So first, Sheila, I'm going to turn to you. Please give me your immediate reaction to these statements and the concerns that you might face or have as it relates.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Saafir. So I would begin with just saying my initial reaction when I first saw the article. I was absolutely just baffled by the just blatant disrespect that was just right there toward our parents in this city. And this is from a leader, right, who has been a lifelong leader since I was a young person, since I was actually a student in Newark Public Schools myself. And I just couldn't believe that we have disintegrated to the point where we actually have leaders, speaking of parents in that way. First of all, I think first and foremost, we want to acknowledge the fact that we're not talking about just parents here. We're talking about families. And there's no way that you can uplift students, young people, and simultaneously degrade their parents. Yeah. And what's even further troubling about this entire scenario is that this is in a long pattern, right? A long line in terms of a pattern of commentary that this particular leader has given publicly through Facebook rants, right? Through public statements when teachers have had on blackface. And he actually, yes. Yeah, like, you know, we could run the gamut and we will talk about those things this evening.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, I listened to our community and, you know, some people were really offended by this, rightfully so. We can see how that happened because I definitely am. Because who are you? Because first of all, the school district is predominantly Black and Latino, in which you are neither.
Right.
So when you make these scathing comments, right, about parents and you're calling them liars and saying that they're the type of parents who really don't care if their kids live or die, don't care if they sacrifice other parents if they live or die. And then you have other parents, right, to the other end of the spectrum who feel like, well, yeah, that could be right because I know of a parent who sent their kid, you know, to school even though the kid had a fever or had a cold. Many of our households are single parent households. So if people are dealing with a lot of atrocities and oppression, right? And even on a global level, like I said, we'll talk about these things in detail this evening, hopefully, but parents are dealing with a lot right now. A lot, as well as teachers, as well as the children. This is no time to make derogatory comments in terms of parents being liars and even making assumptions like that. And yet, okay, for every parent that knows another parent whose child came to school with a fever or a cold, what do we have? Like how many thousands of students that attend those schools?
Nearly 40,000. So we're over 35,000 students.
Right.
And you've raised a great point because to highlight the exception as if it's the norm is already disrespectful enough, or certainly beyond the disrespect, it is abusive. Because what he's essentially stating is that there is a presumption of fraudulent behavior. There is a presumption of lying. There is a presumption that families will go through whatever means necessary just to get kids out the house to return to some sense of normalcy. That in itself reeks of discontentment. It reeks of a lack of concern and care for the conditions of the people that you are supposed to serve, that you get paid $197,000 base to serve.
Absolutely. And when I heard the comment made, Saafir, the first thing I did was I said, this guy has done this before. It rolled off way too reckless, way too comfortable. And all I did was a Google search with his name and racist comments. Sure enough, articles just popped up.
Yes, and the list was almost seemingly endless. So we do have a few of those excerpts that we'll explore in just a moment. But I do want to take this opportunity to turn really quickly to Marcella.
Saafir, one moment. I'm sorry to there's somebody asking me where can they find this show.
So it is on Facebook. Okay. At Get Into It with Saafir.
Okay.
All of that is one word, no spaces or characters. Get Into It with Saafir. And it's also on YouTube at the same handle.
Awesome. Thank you, Saafir.
And I will share it to your page so that you can share it with others as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Saafir.
So, Marcella, upon reading this, and I know that this literally just happened, so you may have had little time to process it, to really digest the extent that this man has gone to describe families that he's tasked with serving. What was your immediate reaction and what came to mind?
I want to be honest because I have not, and I'm sorry, my thing's not situated properly, but I haven't read the article yet. I had a short conversation with you, and I'm just going off that one comment, that quote that I see. But I know that there's a culture within leadership sometimes in some local unions, specifically those that are led by white men, that they're not always focused on the center of the values of unions. When we look, because I'm pro-union, I've been union raised. Both my parents were union members, and I grew up knowing how important the union played within society. But when we explore the values of unionism, it's really to protect people. It's to protect people, to make people's lives better, to help with bringing justice forward and humanity.
Absolutely.
So when I just think about that one quote and thinking about the parents, I have friends who are parents in Newark whose children go to Newark public schools, who are first responders, who are nurses, who work night shifts, and who take this pandemic seriously and understand the impact that it has on us as a nation, as a world. I'm floored that, I mean, again, I did not have the time to read the article yet, but for anyone to feel comfortable to describe parents in that way. And then I think about the groups in New York, the New York moms, the white moms that are organizing, and in Montclair and West Orange, I see them sometimes protesting because they want their schools open. No one would ever think twice to refer or speak of those parents in that manner. So I'm wondering, not even reading the article, because again, I have not read the article, but just taking that one quote in itself, how could anyone feel comfortable in describing parents in that way? So my immediate response, again, I haven't read the article, I want to be clear, but just off that one quote, the standard has to be lifted higher for our union leaders. There's no way that he should feel comfortable even thinking about referring to parents in that manner. And I'm, as a union member, as a person who's pro-union and knows the importance of unions, I'm disgusted.
Yeah.
I can't hear you, Saafir. You're muted or something.
You do raise a great point, Marcella, and I want to echo the sentiment that yes, I am pro a construct of unionism. that construct certainly provides protections for educators. It sets standards for how interactions are supposed to take place, how their evaluations are supposed to take place, how promotions and longevity and tenure is determined. The beauty of unions is exactly that, the protections that it affords, the standardization that it establishes, and the ongoing respect that it garners for that entity, that role, and that industry. And we should be elevating the role to really match with the type of respect it deserves. But when we have someone in leadership, and I don't know what his background is with regards to education. I don't know if he's ever served as a teacher or has in any way lived up to the capacity of those that he serves. But the challenge that I have is that his actions do not demonstrate the type of values that the union is supposed to stand for.
Exactly.
And that's really a shameful thing to have happen, especially on a public platform like this. I mean, when I thought about the article and the statements that were made where he was cited as saying that we have to assume parents will lie, mind blowing. But when I thought about it, I thought to myself, I know he had the opportunity to retract at least some part of his statement before it went to print or before it was published online. And yet that didn't take place. So that means to me that this was something that was said with intention and that was approved by him to be published and disseminated for the public to read. I want to jump into some of the points, Sheila, that you raised about some past experiences that are already documented that really demonstrate for us the type of leadership that has been shown under his watch.
Yeah. So,
and the person, for all of you who are just joining, the individual we're referring to here is the president of the Newark Teachers Union. Certainly, we're coming from the vantage point of supporters and advocates for an effective union, one that models excellence and stands for protection. But actions like these have to be called out. And because we have platforms that afford us these opportunities, it's our responsibility to call them out. Sheila, you were saying.
Right. So thank you so much for bringing up this article, because this is one of many where we see the recklessness of his comments, that we can be assumptive, that I think that was the word that he used, of some type of racial underlying racial issues here. For example, and this happened this year, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me. This is either from 2019 to 2020. Yeah, 2019. Thank you. And where we had a teacher here at Science High School, one that a study was done, right, by former board member Leah Owens, that showed how there was a discrepancy in young Black boys being accepted into that school. But we have a teacher, right, that decided to wear blackface. But the troubling part about this was the commentary made by the union president. Now, we understand all too well due process, right? And so I think that we're all pro-union as far as that's concerned. However, when you make a comment as a leader in terms of saying that, you know, he had a freedom of speech, he can believe what he wants to believe, it all just falls in line with number 45 making statements such as, I see good people on both sides. These are not comments that we need leaders of our children making, because it's scathing in terms of how they feel about us as a people, as a culture, as a race, right? As taxpayers who's paying that near $200,000 a year. And the level of disrespect, right, just echoes of what we've been dealing with on a national level, right?
Absolutely.
It echoes, and that's why it's so troubling, because these types of comments have the power and potential to scar our children in ways that we would never physically see. And that is what I really have the problem with. This guy needs a reality check about his disposition, right? about his pre-existing problem that he has. And even at one point in this, Saafir, I don't know if you could bring this up. At one point, he says that he's gonna talk. He's finna, Finna, right?
Yeah.
So he uses the ebonics to. He said he's finna.
Code.
Thank you, code switch. Once again, extremely offensive. And especially in a climate where we need our children now more than ever to feel as if they are accepted because they are, and their leadership should echo that instead of what this particular leader is deciding to echo in his commentary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, it's further indicative of the fact that there's two variables or really two descriptions that could be given to these types of actions or to the sentiment that is expressed. One, at minimum, he has absolutely no touch. He's out of touch with the needs and the conditions in which the people that he serves have to live.
Right.
He's out of touch with that. Or two, at most, he is completely and utterly uncaring about that condition and fully aware of what they have to face.
Right. Absolutely no present, no empathy present at all. And it also, again, you know, just leads to this is what you've been doing, apparently, assumptively, right? To take his own word, because you're too comfortable in it. And there's no way. And if you have been comfortable in this type of rhetoric publicly, then again, you need a reality check. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Yeah. You know, there's a few other pieces of information I want to share during this conversation, but the first thing I want to highlight is when you are in a role where you have a responsibility to model behaviors for an entire workforce that serves 35,000 students, regardless of your intentions, you have a responsibility to model appropriate behavior. You have a responsibility to create an atmosphere that is welcoming, inclusive, and provides belonging. No student or family member should be made to feel uncomfortable or unwelcome to engage with the education system so that they can partner in managing that education for their child.
That's right. Absolutely. Period. Absolutely.
Now, when we look at some of the occurrences that have taken place over the course of his tenure, you know, as you said, it's indicative of the type of leadership that you said he really should reconsider. Well, reconsider is one R word that came to mind for me. The other is he should resign. Okay. And that's just my opinion. And if anyone else shares in that opinion, you're free to your opinion. But this is not something that should be allowed to continue.
Absolutely.
When we looked at that last slide where we saw the occurrence where this teacher, a white male teacher, showed up at school in blackface, the Newark Teachers Union president, again, was quoted as saying he's already apologized if he's offended anyone.
Right.
Well, he shouldn't need to apologize, according to him. It's the United States of America, and we should value opinions whether we agree with them or not. Valuing an opinion and allowing someone to come in front of our children and perpetuate these ideals that conflict with who we've called them to be, who we're raising them to be, that furthers the idea of oppression and racism is not acceptable. Free speech does not give you the right to come into a classroom as a teacher and make a child feel that they are deserving of punishment or racial injustice. And so the student, one student, she was in 11th grade at the time, said, I just thought, why is no one punishing him for this? The answer to that question is because under the NTU's president's leadership, they defended that teacher to ensure that no punishment would come to him for his actions.
And see, this is why I always say, who is speaking for the parents?
Yes.
Stop acting like parents don't care because they're not as participatory as you would like them to be. Like I said, many homes are financially strained. And I find this attack on parents just as disrespectful as this $600 that was handed down, that is being, talked about being handed down as a stimulus package now, right? And it's just disrespectful. And we exist. And if we have to keep saying that as adults, imagine how our children feel. Yeah. What type of abuse, right, that many students probably can't even verbalize is going on with them inside of these institutions that, again, they can't even verbalize because of this type of thought process, right? That could be shared. Yeah. Because of this type of thought process that's allowed to penetrate through our school district for who knows how long now. Who knows how long? Right. Like I said, when you Googled it, and as soon as I saw it, again, the first thing I thought, this is not his first rodeo. There has to be documentation.
Absolutely.
Certainly it was. So yeah, he definitely needs to go.
And I just want to add real quick, Saafir, if I could just interject before I
absolutely go ahead, Marcella.
Because Sheila. I'm sorry, Sheila.
It's okay, Sheila.
You just made a thought pop up in my head when you were talking about parents, because a lot of times, people, specifically Black parents, people want institutions, teacher unions, administration always want to talk about when the Black parent, things can't get done because the Black parent doesn't show up. But I would like to disagree with that, because I know in Newark parents show. I know a couple of parents that show up and bring teachers and administration to task. I can think about 2 that do on a consistent basis. And I know where I live in Montclair, that there's a whole Black parent organization, National Independent Black Parent Association, Montclair chapter, NIBPA, that created protective factors for Black children, and the whole community within Montclair allowed for an intern superintendent to come and dismantle everything that Black parents put in place for
you see what I'm saying?
Children. So Black parents show up. They show
Absolutely.
up. And sometimes it's not the numbers that white PTAs, those white groups show up with, but they show up and they represent for their children, and nobody ever really is appreciative of that, because at the end of the day, Black oppression is real in this country.
And that's another thing that I could just comment on that, Saafir, really quick. I'm so sorry. That is just one point that, if nothing else gets heard tonight, what Marcella just said, that Black oppression is real in this country. We're not going to continue to feign ignorance on the fact that if a parent steps before a board to speak about a concern or a complaint, that it's all too feasible that parent can get a phone call and be out of the job, right? And we're talking about the era of COVID, when many people have already lost their jobs, right? When people are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to get food on their tables. I mean, again, you can look at nationally the atrocities and massacres that has happened, right? To the foundational Black African American in this country. And you're not going to look at the victim, right, without addressing the root cause and point your finger. No, you're not. And who is he to do that? Who is he to do that? Like that, he's dead wrong for that. So Marcella, I'm sorry. I just wanted to elaborate on her point. Thank you for that. And Saafir, I apologize for interrupting the
That's quite right. If I had to summarize it though, really quickly, if I had to summarize what we're seeing take place, I would have to call it an exploitation of privilege. We know that certain privileges already exist, but in this particular case, we have an individual who is already comfortable with salary, who's already comfortable with the protections afforded him by his organization, and comfortable because of the fact that he's gone through this type of process before without any recourse. No type of disciplinary action, no type of punishment. There have been no consequences.
No accountability at all.
He does not need to be accountable for his actions. Well, we're here to hold his feet to the fire. And with that said, I just want to turn really quickly to some statistics, because when we think about what's taking place and the statements that were made, where there's a presumption that parents are going to lie. Newark parents will lie. This is what he is saying. That parents, if you live in Newark, the expectation is that you will be a liar just to get your kids back in school. But we have to ask the question, what are these families already facing? What were they facing before COVID? Well, I have the answer for you. I'm glad you asked. Nationally, 19% of preschool enrollment was made up of Black males. 19%. However, in contrast to that, 45% of students that were suspended, and this is preschool, nationally, were comprised of Black boys. So this further illustrates the type of disparities that we see in the American education system, not just locally, but nationally. But then when we ask the question, who is this man talking to? We know that Newark Public Schools, this school district, is almost exclusively comprised of Black and brown and Black and Latino students.
That's right.
So he's talking to others. He's talking to others because he himself does not fit those descriptions. And therefore, he's in a position where he is otherizing the type of actions he expects to see from families. What say you, Marcella?
I want to focus on what you were talking about before, the accountability. That's right there. I think that's that tone is set by administration. I think that Superintendent Leon needs to address it and hold him accountable and make it known that that type of behavior won't be tolerated, and doesn't even matter if he's the president, because union presidents can be taken to arbitration. They can be charges can be brought up against him, and if he's not behaving in an appropriate manner, especially with the position that he's holding, he needs to be called to task for that and held accountable. So I think that's important. And with regards to the clear racism, with the nationwide teaching force is made up of 85% white women. I know that is not reflective in some of our urban communities, but when you're working within a system, no matter what you look like, there's a tone that's set, and there's a particular group of children that people feel like they can get stuff off on, and that has to stop. And people in position, people who look like me, need to call that out when they see it. And that's what I'm doing right now. That shouldn't be acceptable. It shouldn't be tolerated. If he doesn't apologize immediately, there needs to be actions taken.
I first want to take this opportunity, Marcella, to commend you for your remarks.
Absolutely.
You raised a very important point. We're talking about challenges that exist and obstacles that must be overcome by nearly and exclusively Black and Latino community. But we're talking about an administrator who happens to be white. And so, to your point, it oftentimes does take someone with whom perhaps he can relate to actually get through to him. And I'm hopeful that this information will get back to him, that your willingness to take a stand as a white community member, but also a parent in public schools, recognizing that the disparities that exist for Black students, Black children, is very real, and they certainly are widespread. I just want to thank you for that.
And I just want to just add something really quick here, because I have a very unique perspective as a white woman. Because I know what happens among white people sometimes, and things that are said, usually in the beginning of relationships, because I do have Black children, and before people know I have Black children, they'll feel free to say things in front of me they wouldn't say sometimes. And while some now the times are changing and a lot of people like to spew words like equity and anti-racism, those things are so embedded in our history and our culture that I cannot buy that those things are just going to disappear. They're not.
Right.
Because me as a white woman, I have to fight daily to address my racism. You know what I'm saying? I have to meet my racism where it's at every day. And I have Black children, you know? So it's something that we definitely have to work at. I really suggest, I know, you know, Newark Teachers Union isn't under NJEA, they're under AFT. I know NJEA offers a whole bunch of workshops pertaining to anti-racism and addressing racism within our public schools and using unionism to address social justice. But a lot of times that's just talk. So people need to be, especially in leadership positions and on all levels, local levels, county levels, state levels, their feet do need to be held to the fire, and people need to walk that talk. You can't just talk it. You have to walk it. You have to demonstrate it. You have to, you know, I don't want to be fired for any biases that I might have. We all have biases, you know what I'm saying? But the point is that we deal with them, we address them, we develop ourselves, we all hold each other accountable, because we're creating a world for our children and we're responsible for making it better than how we have it. And I don't even see it being better. I see it just getting worse. So I think we all need to step it up a little bit, and might make some people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
Yeah, so it's a great point. You know, as we brought up some of the challenges that families faced before COVID even arrived, we know, based on information available to us, that those conditions are worsening for many families, and disproportionately, it has adversely impacted families of color, Black families, Latino families. So Newark at large is suffering as a result of COVID-19. So these types of remarks at a time like this, when you bring those two factors together and you find that correlation, you see that there is a complete disregard and lack of concern for the conditions of the people who are really your neighbors. The ones that you serve, that you actually get paid to provide a service for.
That's key word right there, because a lot of people forget that we are public servants. That's
right. Right. And with that being said, I'd like to segue into yet another comment that he made. And again, it's so many parallels between him and number 45, right? So earlier this year, around February, he made another Facebook post, right, on social media. And I just want to share a part of this. And it reads the following, because I see this as another blatant racist attack on parents, right? You would not have a job, okay, if it wasn't for the students who attend public schools.
That's right.
And those parents attending there. But let me tell you how he feels about the parents. I'm going to read this. Lastly, these are some advice tips that he's giving that people need to do. Okay, start providing mandatory parent training. That's indicative of something right there, right? These kids need parents. The hospital won't release a newborn without a car seat, but they will release it to a parent, however ill-prepared they are to raise one. Simply having a child doesn't make you a parent. It may make you a mom or a dad, but unless you are capable of bringing up and caring for that child, you are not a parent. Again, I refer to millions of dollars worth of services available to struggling young mothers. Every high school in this city has a main office counter full of flyers and brochures from Planned Parenthood. Our prisons are full of our young men who all sing the same tune. I wish I had a father growing up. Why didn't anyone ever straighten me out when I was younger. I dare you.
So, Sheila, so I did not list that one, and I know that you have the source for that. If you can drop it in the chat, that
I
would be
certainly
great.
will. I sent you that. This is in the article written by Laura Waters entitled Superintendent Leon, etc., etc. But if you scroll down to the bottom, like I said, I don't know what direction different authors write, but what I do know is those were his exact words that came directly from his social media page. And again, it's in line, right? The consistency is there of the disrespect and the degrading of the very parents that you're supposed to represent leadership in this community for. How dare you to look and point your finger, not being Black or Hispanic, to point your finger at the outcomes, right? The outcomes of living in a construct here in this country where we have never had equitable education, ever.
Right.
Ever. The numbers that you just showed, scathing in comparison. We all know there's lots of documentation. School to prison pipeline exists. In the same way, the school to poverty pipeline exists. Where's his commentary on getting financial literacy into these schools? He's been in leadership now for as long as I'm alive, probably. Where is his commentary on making sure that the Amistad Act, that our children get to know who they are and their history? And I don't care if he made a speech about it before when he was trying to get attention, because I don't know, he may have. But what I'm saying is his commentary lends directly to a very racist philosophy that he carries that is probably so deeply embedded and inherent in who he is that at this point he probably doesn't even realize it. And that's why I agree that he has to go.
And see, that's part of the problem, because it's bad enough, it's problematic enough that these types of statements are being made by the president of Newark's Teachers Union. It's bad enough, but it's worse that he probably doesn't even recognize the extent of the racial undertones that he's expressing. How dare you suggest that a parent or a family who is ill prepared, either economically, financially, or educationally, all as a result of the conditions in which they live, over which they have no control, is not really a parent? Who are you that you are in a position to make that declaration?
He's somebody that should have probably been gone from leadership a long time ago. And it just brings back the concerns about time limits, right, on leadership. And like I said, these people have been involved since I was a little girl, and you wonder why we're not turning out and producing greater numbers of success that you have to mention when this particular kid gets accepted into this college or that college. The truth of the matter is we live in a country, right, that's running right now on capitalism, but our kids know nothing about finances. They know nothing about saving money, investing money. They know nothing about stocks. They know nothing about how banks or how just money works in general. And why is that not something that you're championing, right, in your role of leadership? Instead of pointing the fingers to parents, right, who I might add also are a product of yesterday's failed education that you stood in leadership with.
That's right.
And he needs to take a seat somewhere.
Well, he takes several seats in the back of the room. And when he gets back there, I'm hoping that he's met with the type of conflict that he's trying to incite, because these words are inflammatory. These words don't just show that you don't care. It shows that you believe that you are better than those whom you serve. And that is a crying shame. Now, when we look at some of the information you brought up, you said that there's a school to prison pipeline. Well, that in itself is very real. He made remarks about strict discipline practices in schools. And in fact, I'll cite him where he says that the district has a discipline policy. Use it with a zero tolerance for infractions. Children require a proper measure of discipline. Any adult who argues this is most likely the victim of never having received any themselves. Really? And then he says, a mom may say that no one disciplines her child but her. And then he turns around and says, a parent would never say something like that. Children need to be introduced to consequences early by every adult possible, available. And then he ends it by saying, we train puppies for God's sake. So first you begin by trying to influence the reader to believe that strict school disciplinary policies are effective when we know that they're not. And second, you try and influence the reader to believe that somehow zero tolerance discipline is going to improve outcomes for students. And that if you as a parent disagree, you're not qualified to be a parent. Well,
because you're being compared to dogs.
And then you end by comparing these students, Black and Latino students, to training puppies. I don't know who he thinks he is, but obviously he's been given a very comfortable seat. But what I will say is that zero tolerance discipline has resulted in Black students facing disproportionately harsher punishment than white students in public schools. You can see right here on the chart that while public school enrollment is comprised of 51% white students across the country and only 16% of Black students, the students who face multiple suspensions, 42% of them are Black. So how are these zero tolerance discipline practices helping anybody if they're already pushing students outside of an already repressive and lacking school environment and leaving them home for periods at a time disproportionately because you want to have control over people as if they're puppies?
He said
something earlier that really struck me. He said, just because you have a child, it doesn't make you a parent. I want to tell him, Mr. President of the Newark Teachers Union, just because you have a job doesn't make you a leader. Just because you collect a check doesn't make you qualified. And regardless of your title, you certainly do not have the right to try and put yourselves in the shoes of people that you could never relate to because you don't live in the conditions in which they must face every day, and then dare say out of your mouth they are liars, and all because you assume they are and you say so. Go ahead, Shirley, you were saying.
No, he's just disgusting. He's disgusting, and him and his philosophy needs to have been gone. Been gone. What he's been doing, what the things that he's been saying. Again, can you just imagine how that acts out, right, with our students? How does it act out with the teachers? Right? Because, and again, historically, he has a reputation for jumping to help non-Black teachers. He has a reputation of doing that and disregarding when Black teachers have issues. But like I said, we see when it was a teacher with a Black face on, you know, it's good people on both sides, you know. We can have feelings. That's disgusting. He's no different from what we just dealt with for the last 4 years with number 45 in office. But what he did do, what number 45 did do, was bring to light how many races we really do have. Because I think before now that people were kind of in denial. Many people were in denial about how detrimental our plight really was. Right. We see near half the country going along with this negativity, these divisive measures, right? We really have to now, even though we have another president-elect, right? And so that's kind of pending and up in the air still, but we still have to move forward with making sure that we out these racist people, because they are the problem with not just Newark, as he pointed out, with America, spelled with 3 Ks in it. Because we don't need these types of divisive tactics. We need togetherness, we need unity, and we need him and everyone else with these archaic philosophies about making America great again. We need them gone. We have children who are full throttle with technology and can be creators. But what can you create, right, when you're being institutionally oppressed through covert racism. And,
Right.
and the thing is, we have so many parents who are just so nice and unsuspecting. Many times they'll go along with them, like I said, and say, oh, well, you know, there are parents sending kids to school with a code. And no parent wants to do that. No parent wants to do that. And like I said, we have so many issues that have been foisted upon us. We have never had equity in terms of education, in terms of books, in terms of our kids walk to school seeing plight every day, right, for years. We have so many, I mean, drinking brown water, the water isn't right, the air isn't right. And now they're stressed out with all of this cyber learning. And to just take a point from what they're also trying to push with SEL, social emotional learning, where's his social emotional maturity?
Yeah, he's lacking social emotional intelligence. He certainly doesn't understand the practices, and then has complete disregard, because what are we dealing with right now? We are coming on the heels of day one of Kwanzaa, Umoja, unity, and what he's spewing right now is hatred, divisiveness, and disunity. Who's going to call him on it? Who's going to check him? Where is the letter of resignation? That is what I want to see. When we talk about the school to prison pipeline, not only do the previous statistics paint a bleak picture of student discipline and how these zero tolerance practices disproportionately impact Black students, but this next statistic really highlights the direct link between school and prison, whereas a pipeline is no longer needed. Right now, it's merely a transfer. Look at this. As of the date of this reporting, Black students represent 31% of school-related arrests, when we know that the percentage of Black students in schools nationwide are below 20%. How did we get to this point? This is indicative of larger issues at play. And those issues stem from problems like this, where there are unfettered opinions that are being spewed across the internet by people who have been placed in positions that, one, they are either unqualified for or unfit in which to serve. And they also come from long-standing practices, long-standing laws that have governed us for far too long. You have to remember, it was illegal to enslave a Black African body person legally, kill them for being disobedient, kill them for attempting to escape. It was illegal to keep Black people from reading for years. Some of those practices still exist today. The law has not provided any type of reparative justice to address those long-standing issues. And when what he's talking about are the issues that still exist as a result of the cycle that has never been broken. It has never been repaired. The economic injustices, the economic conditions in which we find ourselves, these are not families' doings of their own. It's the result of a community in which they live, or a country in which they live, where they are not valued because of the color of their skin, rather than what Martin Luther King Jr. said was the content of their character.
Right. And just to piggyback off something you just said too about the reparative measures that have yet to be taken. Do you think John Abagon doesn't realize that? Of course he does. He's made $200,000 a year, right, at the expense of a disenfranchised community of students who have been denied an education, not just locally, right, but on a national level. And he understands this because, and just like we don't have that voice and that support locally, do we have it at a county level?
Right.
Do we have it at a state level? Right? Because I just saw there was a commentary, right, that Alexandra Ocasio just recently made in terms of, she gave a really ambiguous response regarding reparations. And we have to make sure that we have representatives that show up at the table, not afraid to speak to the very real plight that we're experiencing. Because if we continue to have these representatives who act like, oh, there's nothing going on, everything is happy, everything is not happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Our community is imploding, and it's very evident now within this era of COVID, because we see business owners, right, losing their business You can sit on an airplane right next to a person, but somebody in our community has to shut their business down because people can't come in because they don't have a mask or it's not essential. How essential is it that people are going to Florida to lay on the beach?
Well, and then on top of that, when you talk about the inequity in economics around the country, you see it even more prevalent in the relief packages that have been released.
Absolutely.
When you talk about the amount of money that large corporations like Ruth's Chris and other large entities have been able to acquire under these paycheck protection loans, which are forgivable, and they don't have to repay, and they use them. And even Jared Kushner himself and his entities were able to obtain from laws passed that now have disproportionately adversely impacted people and business owners of color. It just reeks of really fraud. It reeks of
absolutely
loopholes. It reeks of institutional oppression, institutionalized racism. It reeks of complete and utter disregard and lack of concern for your fellow man. And that is what we're seeing, not just across the country, but now locally with people like this president of the Newark Teachers Union, whom I will say again, must resign without reservation.
Real quick, Saafir, because I have to go, but I just want to say I really appreciate being here. I really appreciate all of your input on this. Again, I just am learning about it, but I do want to say as a proud union member that in order to protect the notion of unions and the need for unions, those in leadership that behave in this way and who go against our values, and again, the values of unionism, lie within protecting people, bringing about social justice, bringing about humanity. So when we find leaders who go against that, we have to call them out, because if we're not calling them out and holding them to task, we are jeopardizing the future of unions. So anybody who wants to entertain rhetoric that if you are calling this man to task, you are jeopardizing you. No, I'm protecting unionism.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm protecting it.
Absolutely.
I have to go because I wasn't prepared to do this, but I just felt like I needed to hear what you all were saying. I'm glad that I joined you. I'm glad that I heard everything, and I want us to move forward and call out, because it's going to continue to happen. This is embedded in our history, embedded in this country, and it's going to continue to happen. And the only way that it will stop is when we continually call it out each and every time that it occurs. So
Absolutely.
I just applaud you for throwing it, pulling this together, so no one can feel like there won't be anything. There's something. If you come out your mouth with some stupidity, some not pure nonsense, that you're going to be addressed. So I applaud you. I applaud you, Sheila. Everything that you said tonight on point, and I appreciate all of you. And I just want to let y'all know I can't stay for the whole entire evening, but I really appreciate you guys organizing this and being here.
Yeah, and Marcel, I want to thank you as well for sharing your perspectives, also for sharing a bit about yourself. I didn't go into details until you did that. As a parent of Black children, you too have seen what some of those disparities.
So that was me as a white teacher among other white teachers. But then I did also end up having that perspective, but it took me years to figure it out.
Yeah,
because I wasn't, as a white woman bringing up Black children, it was only another Black woman that actually helped me and developed me to understand what was actually even happening to my children, because it's so covert sometimes that you don't even know what's happening. But as the one thing that is important also is that my experience as a white teacher among other white teachers who didn't know that I had Black children, who would sometimes talk about families of Black students. And, you know, that's, again, I don't know what it is, what the percentage is in Newark, but nationwide, the average is 85% of teachers are white women, and that they're not used to black children, sometimes Black boys, and that's why you have disproportionate rates of suspension, and why there's a need to have more Black teachers, specifically in communities, you know, where you have Black students. But
Indeed.
you know, the fight, the fight continues, and I again appreciate you guys for coming here and having this. So
Absolutely,
there's a level of accountability. Hopefully,
absolutely.
Superintendent Leon will address it, because that's unacceptable, and no one, if he's the superintendent of Newark Public Schools, he's also, you know, he's serving the parents of those students. So he should feel obliged to stand up and protect those parents. And I'm hoping that he'll say something.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Marcella. You have a great night.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, Marcella.
So Sheila, as we continue, you know, really, as we begin to shift to the next segment of the conversation, and just before we summarize and get out of here for the night, we know that the president of the Newark Teachers Union was out of line, and that his remarks were disparaging to the families all across this great city, who work hard to make sure that their children eat, to make sure that they have clothing and resources to provide for them, and to make sure that they're prepared even to attend school in this virtual environment.
Right.
But the real question at this point is, where do we go from here? What types of solutions are available? What can we do? And what can listeners do to really remedy this situation, or to at least influence some type of remedy for this situation?
So that's a good question, and I always try to be solution orientated. But I think the first thing that we have to do is collectively call for his ousting. He needs to resign immediately. This probably is something that has been a long time, coming, and like I said, the commentary is so innate, right, that he probably doesn't even realize it. So what the people have to do is make sure that they bring a call to action, right? I would say to probably start by speaking at the school board meeting, right? Definitely speaking in Trenton on these issues. And again, we have to start the very lengthy process of carving out not just him,
Right.
but anybody else who impedes true liberation and true liberty. And again, it's not just a local issue. And that's why it's so important, because whatever it is that we do here in the city of Newark, it creates a blueprint for what can be done in places like Chicago or Detroit, or even in Trenton or in Washington, right? So we have this same problem of injustice, the same problem of inequitable education. James Baldwin even used to speak on it. Like, these issues aren't new, but the way that we attack them must be as direct as the way that he attacked these parents and these families here in the city of Newark. And again, how dare him to place judgment on any person, Black, Latino, or otherwise, when he's not either. How dare you shape your $200,000 a year narrative, right? Let's face it. What do you know about being poor in 2020? What do you know about getting a $1,200 check that you had to live off of for the next several months, right? Yeah. And had to stand out in lines to get food that wasn't even probably approved by the FDA, right? What do you know about struggling, right? What do you know about any parent? How dare you? Yeah. How dare you? And to put things like this on your social media. So whoever your friends are, right? Maybe they were teetering and tottering on being racist, but now that you're affirming those thoughts and beliefs, right? So like I said, he's a part of the problem, and collectively we just have to address it. I think these are first steps, right, to just call it out, to bring about public awareness on the issue. But we have to be steadfast in that we like I said, we need to address the freeholders to make sure that more people understand what's going on and to be aware. We may need to bring the issues to the municipal council. But again, anybody who is not on board, and I'm a union supporter to my heart. So this, and I love what Marcella said earlier. She said it the best, so I won't reiterate that because I'm in 100% agreement. But what I will say is that due process has nothing to do with racism within any institution, and it has to go. It has to be told no, and for many of us, it has to be told no for the first time in history. You do not get to put down Black or brown families in our community. You don't get to do that, and there's so many people who feel this way, but have not just come out and said it. Like these articles, these words that I just read during this show, they came right from him. And like I said, I don't know if the article was slanted for or against him, but what I do know is your words are your words. And when you're talking about Black families and you're picking an attack on Black families, then you're picking an attack with me. And that's where we are, and that's where we all need to be as a community. We need to be on the same page with that. We need leadership, right, that's going to combat the real issues we need. And again, those issues are financial literacy in our schools. Those issues are how to make money if you decide not to go to college and get in huge student debt. That even after presidential candidates make promises that they're going to help alleviate or remedy, and then they double back and don't.
Right.
Where has the Black community ever had a bailout? We didn't have it ever. Even now with the COVID funds, everybody's getting bailed out and getting money except for the Black community. What is $600 going to do for anybody? And my thing is that ideally, people don't want the help. People want to be self-sufficient. People want to take care of themselves. That is why they go to school. But if the schools are not going to make our young people self-sufficient and understand finances, money, how it works. Some people, like so many kids have iPhones, right? And if you look at your iPhone, it has an app on here, right, for the stock market. Our young people, many of them are not even looking at it. They don't even know what that is. So where he needs to do what he needed to have been doing, let me say that, is addressing those issues that will immediately remedy the wealth gap that we're having in our communities.
Yeah, he himself.
Let me just say this one last part. Our children know nothing about grants. They know nothing about anything other than getting in trouble in school and feeding the school to prison pipeline that shouldn't be here. So to that end, like I said, just bringing about awareness, and he just really needs to go, and we need to be strategic and consistent, and so that goal actually comes into fruition.
Absolutely. And you know, more than anything, he himself needs to be solutions oriented. We read through all the comments that were made where he was quoted, even when it came to the remarks about zero tolerance discipline practices. They all really revealed a mindset that is out of touch with the community that you serve. But more importantly, it revealed a mindset that somehow is more comfortable pointing the finger at those who are victimized by their own conditions that have been plaguing them because of the country in which we live and the conditions that have wrought us both legally and through illegal means persisted, and instead never even pointed out what solutions or offered solutions that could help remedy those problems. So again, Sheila, I want to thank you for joining me on tonight. I'm going to ask you to just hold the moment. I'm going to come to you right at the end of the broadcast just to talk next steps with you. And to all the viewers, thank you for joining us. Again, you have been with Get Into It with Saafir. Tonight, we discussed some disparaging remarks made by the president of the Newark Teachers Union, where he indicates that there is a presumption of guilt, where he knows that families will lie, so that their students can get back into school. And for that reason, he wants to enforce testing. Testing is not an issue. I'm not coming against the idea of testing. I'm not coming against the idea where, there have to be some type of accountability for the school to ensure safety measures are in place. But what I will stand against anytime it rears its ugly face and its ugly head is oppressive and disparaging remarks for the community members who are my neighbors, both Black, Latino, and otherwise, that are made by someone who does not understand the plight in which they live. Your lack of understanding for the plight of your fellow man does not give you excuse to ignore them. And privilege has to be eradicated. Privilege protects privilege, and privilege promotes poverty so that privilege can remain privileged. Remember that, and you'll always be able to identify those little nuances and those covert operations of racial oppression and racism that seek to usurp the authority that you ought to have as a community member in the community in which you live, and the schools and the system that serve you, your families, and your children. Thank you again for joining me on tonight. This has been another edition of Get Into It with Saafir. Join us next time. Stay tuned, like the page, follow us so that you can continue to get updates about what we have coming up. Thank you again. I'm Saafir. Good night.